I was growing at a rate of 1,000 followers a day.
So what do you think has really attributed to your success and growth on Instagram within the past, like 3+ years?
Number one, I have totally detached from trying to make things perfect. Looked at my following and I had grown from, again, like 60-ish thousand to over 100,000. And I was like, okay, like if this grew, if this essentially almost doubled my following in 1 month, I'm going to keep going.
Today on Deepfeed, I chat with Brock Johnson, an Instagram coach who helps creators and business owners develop connections and grow their brands using social media. He became a 7-figure entrepreneur at 25 years old and gained over 400,000 Instagram followers in 1 year. You might also recognize him as the son of influencer Chalene Johnson, who is also the co-host of their podcast, Build Your Tribe. This episode is an Instagram masterclass. We discuss how to develop a high-growth Instagram strategy, the key components to creating engaging short-form video, developing a successful sales funnel, and much more. Let's get into it. Hey, Brock, welcome to Deepfeed.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so what is your professional background, and can you talk us through the journey that led you to getting to where you are today as a professional creator?
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel very privileged in how I was raised. Most people who are getting into entrepreneurship and content creation, for the most part, are like the first in their families to do it. And maybe they even face pushback from their family because their family wants them to have a traditional career path, become a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. But I was raised in a very entrepreneurial family by a mother who basically was a content creator my entire life. My mom is Chalene Johnson, so people who have been in the entrepreneurial space for a while, or maybe even like the fitness space, might know her name. But her and my
Yes.
dad owned a numerous businesses growing up, and so it wasn't like we sat around the dinner table talking about KPIs and how to be a better entrepreneur and stuff. But it was very monkey see, monkey do. So I got to see my mom creating content, running a business, both her and my dad seeing the pros and the cons, the things like great things like getting to take me to school every day and go to every practice and game that my sister and I had, but also see the negatives, which is that it can be hard to like shut off the work brain and you always have the opportunity to be working more when you work for yourself. So I got to see that from a very early age. And then because I was just around it and we always had cameras and microphones in the house, and my mom had a podcast before a podcast was a podcast. I created my first YouTube video when I was probably like 10 or 11 years old. Created my first like informational YouTube video, and it was just a random little video about how to like put duct tape on your skateboard so that you could turn it into like a snowboard and practice tricks on the trampoline, something random. But that was like the beginning of my content creation. And so I just kept creating content and also creating little businesses. I would sell little things here or there. I'd have an idea. I'd have a random invention. I'd sell things to my classmates at school. And it just kind of grew and evolved until the point where I was a freshman in college, when I was about 18 or 19 years old. And that's when I started my first legitimate business, what I would call like my first real business. And at that time, it was a course. It was sold for about $20. And the course was teaching moms how to keep their kids safe on Snapchat. So that was like my first real business. It was filmed all on my phone. I had like a cheap $10 microphone from Amazon or something. But that was really my turning point from just kind of something that I did on the side. I would have a business for a month or two here or there to actually being like, okay, this is something I'm pursuing full time, both in terms of the content creation and the actual owning a business aspect.
Yeah, I'm curious what inspired you to start that business, like teaching moms how to keep kids safe on Snapchat. Like, where did that come from?
Yeah, so I think oftentimes people have this notion that like the business that they're doing needs to be their ultimate passion in life, and it needs to be like this thing that they're just obsessed with and in love with. And while I think that there's definitely like huge upside to that, and maybe that's a great goal to strive for like in the long run of your business, for me at that time that was not the answer because that wasn't my problem. My problem wasn't that I was lacking purpose or motivation or didn't have a love. The reason for creating that business was simply that I saw a need. And the need was that people were freaking out about Snapchat. This was back in like 2015, 2016, when Snapchat was very like in the news and it was scary and like what's
Yeah.
going on and there's disappearing messages. So I saw the need, and then I saw that I had a unique skill set in that I was, 18, 19 years old. So I knew how to use Snapchat. But also I wasn't 14, so I wasn't like a middle schooler who was still like ashamed to talk to parents or whatever. Um, and most specifically, I had just taught my parents how to use Snapchat because I was off at college and I was like, hey, I don't want to text you guys all day. So I'll just snap you like cool little things I'm doing, updates on my day. So I recognize that I have a unique skill set and my skill set can solve this problem, this need in society. And then my need, my drive was I wanted to be financially independent. I wanted to cut
Yeah.
that umbilical cord. I wanted to take the silver spoon out of my mouth and stop relying on mommy and daddy to pay for everything. I wanted to, start my own life, so to speak. And so that was my why. That was my need. And that's kind of how I started that first business and why I started it.
Yeah, so what happened to get from there to kind of promoting on Instagram and where you are today as an Instagram coach?
Yeah, so it very much organically grew and transitioned from there. That first business was around for maybe a year or so, and I had taught a couple hundred people through the course how to use Snapchat. But a lot of these people were stay-at-home moms, they were parents who had a side hustle or their own business. So really what I had done was I had taught 1,000 people, yes, how to keep their kids safe on Snapchat, but it was 1,000 business owners and side hustlers and entrepreneurs how to use a new social media. And I, in turn, was having them connect with me on Snapchat. And I was marketing through Snapchat and promoting on Snapchat. And so I recognized that there was this new need. And this new need was a group of people who want to grow a business online who suddenly have access to a new social media platform, Snapchat. And they were like, how do I grow a business on Snap? And I had just done that. I had just built my business totally revolving around Snapchat. So I started then pivoting the business to be instead of how to use Snapchat and keep your kids safe on Snapchat, but how do you use Snapchat for marketing? How do you use Snapchat to grow a brand or a business? And really the unique factor or the unique feature, I guess I should say, that Snapchat had was stories. This was before Instagram had stories.
Right.
This was before TikTok was even a thought in anyone's brain. So stories were what made Snapchat stand out. And then after pivoting the business to be focused on Snapchat, about 2 years later, there was like this mass exodus from Snapchat. It was like, spearheaded by Kylie Jenner. She was like, I'm leaving Snap, and a bunch of influencers went with her. This was right after Instagram released Instagram stories. And so everyone's like, we're leaving Snap, we're going back to Insta. And so I went with them. I made the transition back to Instagram. And that's kind of where I initially was just teaching, hey, here's all the things that worked on Snapchat stories. They're probably going to work on Instagram stories as well because it's basically the same feature. And that's really where the Instagram coaching business was born. And then it was a few years after that before it started to grow into a more expansive Instagram coaching and business.
Yeah, so what year did you transition to Instagram?
So I think this was maybe 2018. I want to say 2018. Yeah, around 2018. So it was fueled by this mass exodus from Snapchat, which I could be getting my exact year wrong. But it was also fueled by at the time I was a college student athlete, and this was back before the days of NIL. So now all student athletes can make all the money they want through their name, image, and likeness. But I graduated right before that
Right.
new law had passed. And so I was in college. I was a student athlete at the time that like it was the biggest sin you could commit as a student athlete was making money off your name, image, and likeness. So after I launched the Snapchat business, the NCAA was like, whoa, 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 like hold up, what's going on? We need to do a full investigation here. And so they did. And so for about 6 months, my business was totally on pause, totally on hold. And I had to like submit like forms and write essays for the NCAA explaining here's my business, here's how it's legitimate, here's how it's not just a scheme so that donors can, donate to the program illegally or whatever. And so it was during that pause that the mass exodus of Snapchat took place. And so when I was allowed, given the green light to resume my business operations, that's when it just was a perfect opportunity to have a clean slate and start over on Instagram. So again, to the long answer to the question is I think 2018 was when that took place.
So during that transition, you said a few years, like what kind of content were you posting? What was your strategy at that time as you were gaining traction on Instagram?
It's funny to look back on it because it was quite wishy-washy. And if you scroll back down on my Instagram feed, like it's still there. And really, Instagram was the only platform where I was consistently putting out content at that time. But I say it was wishy-washy because, one out of every 4 or 5 posts was just a picture of me playing football with like a Drake quote in the caption. And then there was like random cheesy posts that I would like, stage like a photo shoot of myself and put like some random copy and paste generic quote about success leaves clues or, some entrepreneurship quote. I think the first one I ever posted had like gold. It looked like it was made like with gold foil, the font color, and it was just so silly. But that's what it was. And then there was also a
Yeah.
mixture of here are some tips for your Instagram stories. Here are some tips for growing on Instagram. So it was really a transition from what my Instagram had been from when I first got on Instagram in like 2012 up until 2019, which was a personal Instagram, just kind of sharing with my friends. And it slowly transitioned into being more here's entrepreneurship tips, here's social media marketing tips, here's Instagram stories advice. And over the course of maybe a year or two, I slowly weaned myself off of the football pictures and the personal stuff and kind of started posting more about the actual business.
Yeah, so through all of this time, you stayed focused on wanting to continue to teach Instagram as a platform?
Yeah, so that was really the focus from then on, from 2018 or maybe even the end of 2017 until today, even as we're speaking. The focus has been teaching people how to grow on Instagram. It originally started with just Instagram stories as the focus, but now it's really grown into growing, monetizing, reels, stories, live, feed posts, kind of all encompassing the whole Instagram sphere.
Yeah. So what do you think has really attributed to your success and growth on Instagram within the past, like 3+ years?
Yeah, I think it's been really just that consistency. Because when I made that transition from Snapchat to Instagram, I had maybe 20-ish thousand followers. These were mostly friends and family, just kind of people who had been started following me over the course of, the 7 years prior. And then from 2017 until 2021, it my Instagram account grew faster. It grew from I think 20,000 to maybe 50 or 60,000. And that makes sense because suddenly I had a reason for people to follow me, right? I had like a clear niche. I was clearly posting about one educational topic over and over again. So there was a reason, a valuable ad that I was giving in all of my posts. But then in 2021, it was actually April 1st of 2021, I challenged myself to post one reel per day. And this was at a time where like no one was posting one reel a day. And now it seems like everyone's done a 30-day reels challenge. But back then it was like unheard of. And so I was like, hey, I've heard a few people doing this. So let me try it for myself. Let me see if I can post one reel per day for the next month and just see how it goes. And at the end of those 30 days, May 1st, I looked at my following and I had grown from, again, like 60-ish thousand to over 100,000. And I was like, okay, like if this grew, if this essentially almost doubled my following in 1 month, I'm going to keep going. And
Yeah.
so from that date on, all the way till here we are today, I'm still posting at least one reel per day. And I think it's that consistency that has really been the difference maker because there's a lot, honestly, in social media, there's a lot of luck involved. Going viral has a lot to do with luck. Being in the right place at the right time, a lot of those things are fortunate to happen. But when you show up every single day and you're consistent every single day, suddenly you really increase your odds by a lot, right? Like your chances of being in the right place at the right time are significantly increased if you're in that same place every single day. So staying consistent over the last 6 years, and I mean really consistent, as in like one, two, sometimes even three feed posts per day for the last 4 or 5 years. I think that's been the biggest difference maker.
Yeah, I think consistency is consistently one of the things that people cite as being the hardest thing for them to achieve, right?
Yeah.
Like we're running
Mhm.
businesses, we're in school, we have families, whatever it is. How were you able to really commit and stay that consistent?
Yeah. I think there's a few asterisks that I always like to add at the beginning of my answer to this question, which is this is my full-time job. This isn't a side hustle for me. This isn't something that anymore that I'm doing like while I'm in school or while I'm playing sports or whatever. This is my full-time job. I also now have a team that helps me with content creation. I will say for the first 4 years of getting consistent, I did not have a team. I didn't have an editor. I didn't have a graphic designer, nothing like that. Now I have added in that team, and so that it makes it a lot easier. I also, in terms of like the average responsibilities that a person has, I don't have a ton because I don't have children. I have two dogs who are super duper chill. Now we also have a bird, and he's a little bit more of a chaos, but he's super cute. But I don't have kids, right? So I don't have kids. I don't have a job outside of this. So I can dedicate a lot of my time, energy, and effort into staying consistent. But with all of that being said, I think some of the things that have made it easier for me is number one, I have totally detached from trying to make things perfect, which I think for a lot of people is a source of overwhelm and stress because they're trying to make every post like a home run, slam dunk, touchdown, perfect post. And then that leads to either not posting at all because they're just spending so many hours over analyzing their posts, or when they do post that quote unquote perfect post, it doesn't do well, right? It's the post that they're sure would do well, and then it doesn't do well. So then it's defeating and it's draining, and it's like, oh, I feel so hopeless and dejected. Nothing is working. And so I think that's a huge source of overwhelm. But I've been able to really detach from that perfectionism. And like I said earlier, all of my posts are still up. So you're welcome to scroll back to 2021. It'll take you a minute to scroll that far, but you can scroll all the way back and see some posts that have typos and that have like atrocious graphic design before I outsourced my graphic design, or things where just my voice sounds funny because I hadn't figured out how to talk like a normal human being on camera. I was just kind of, you know, imitating what I saw like news anchors doing or whatever, or YouTubers doing. And so detaching from that perfectionism has absolutely helped. And I think that's been my biggest thing for me in staying consistent is I'm so focused on the next post, the next thing I'm going to create, that I'm too busy to try to perfect the thing that I'm about to post.
How did you gain that confidence to like did you wake up one day and you were like, you know what, F this, I'm not going to be a perfectionist? Like was there one thing that happened to you or was it just from doing it over and over that you kind of got used to it?
I'd say a little bit of both. I'd be lying if I didn't say that really intense therapy didn't help. When I was like 20 years old, I did a few weeks of super intense therapy because of something that I was going through personally at the time. And growing up, I was a hardcore people pleaser, hardcore perfectionist, like straight A's and crippling anxiety if I got a B type of kid. But through a series of personal challenges that I went through in my early 20s, as well as finding an awesome therapist who helped me work through that, as well as, like you mentioned, just kind of ripping off the band-aid and posting and posting and posting and posting and posting and seeing the evidence that the ones I thought were perfect did the worst and the ones that I just kind of whipped up and posted did the best. All of that combined helped me move through that perfectionist tendencies, and those tendencies definitely creep up from time to time still. But for the most part, those have quieted down. And that's, I think, been a huge difference maker.
Kind of want to back up just a little and talk about that 30-day challenge you did, which seems to be
Mhm.
kind of like a good, like a pivotal moment for you. And that
Yeah.
is something we see a lot of people doing now, where they're like the 30-day challenge. I think this is a really good lesson for how you approached that, how you approached the 30-day challenge. Did you plan out your whole month? Like, was there a specific theme in all of the content? Like, what was your strategy for that 30-day streak?
Yeah, the only strategy was that there's going to be one post a day for the next 30 days. That was it. That was all of the planning. This was also during a time where the popular kind of style of reels was not direct to camera. So it wasn't, the talking head style videos, the Hormozy style videos that are really popular now. It was not dancing videos. Luckily, I didn't have to learn very much choreography. And it also wasn't the B-roll style of reels that we see so often now, where it's just like a random background video of someone's life and they like slap some text on the screen. It was lip syncs and it was trending funny soundbite clips that you then relate to your niche. Like that was it. And so I didn't batch anything at that time. That is looking back something that I don't necessarily advise, but at that time I wasn't batching content. I wasn't scheduling it in advance. It was literally every day I would wake up and maybe I'd have like a post I made the evening before at most, or sometimes I would just wake up and I'd scroll through some reels and I'd be like, oh, I like that sound. That's a funny sound bite. That's a funny clip. Oh, I have an idea of how I could relate this audio to my niche. And then I would just create it and post it. So I was definitely flying by the seat of my pants. And there was no overarching strategy of all of this content is going to be about X, Y, and Z, or I'm going to have 30% dedicated to sales and 70% dedicated to growth. No, it was just, hey, for the next 30 days, I'm going to post. And I think that made it easier on myself because I didn't have to stress and overthink about percentages and goals and KPIs and strategies. I was just literally, as long as I'm posting today and as long as said post relates to my niche, I'm good to go.
Yeah, I think that's so important, the fact that you shared that, because I think what I would see, or what other people might assume looking at your feed, is that you have like really intense strategies and you're really planning. And I think that's a big hurdle for most people, is that perfectionism that we talked about and wanting everything to be perfect before we even pick up a camera. So I think there's
Yeah.
a really good lesson in that. And just like, even if it's daily and you think about what you want to post that day and you go day by day, as long as you're getting something out same day, really simple, I think that's the biggest like piece of advice too that we tell our clients as well, to not let that perfectionism get in the way of making that progress, for sure. You've been open how you grew. I know you mentioned 100,000, that you saw that jump, but then you saw another jump like 400K in 1 year. What
Mhm.
was what was the catalyst behind like so much growth there?
Yeah. So part of it was right place, right time. This was right after the 30-day challenge ended, even though it never truly ended. We're here 4 years later and it's still going. And so I was like, I'm just going to keep posting. I'm going to stay consistent. And if anything, I'm going to challenge myself to post a little bit more. And when I say that, that can oftentimes be misunderstood as like hustle culture or grind or just work harder. And those aren't things that I support or believe in. I instead think that we should try to find ways to increase our output without necessarily having to increase our input, without having to like work harder or work longer. Essentially, we're working smarter so that we can post a second time in the day without having to spend more than 5 more minutes that day. And so over the last few years, I've dialed that number up to now I think I average like 2 or 3, sometimes even 4 feed posts per day on Instagram. And realistically, we could sustain more. And I say we because it's me and my team at this point. We could post 5, 6, 7 times a day. But I think that that has been a real catalyst in the growth. And so from 2021 through mid 2023, maybe beginning of 2023, I was growing at a rate of 1,000 followers a day, net 1,000. So I would gain probably 1,500, lose maybe 500 followers a day, which that in and of itself is kind of a crazy thing to say, that I was losing 500 followers a day. Um, but it was at a time where Instagram was really hot. Reels were really heavily being pushed by the algorithm, but not everyone was posting reels yet. Nowadays, everyone's posting reels. My grandma literally posts a couple reels every single week. There's just so much like competition and noise. The supply demand ratio has really changed in the last year or so. But there was a 2 or 3 year period where it was kind of like the golden age of Instagram reels, where Instagram was pushing them, but not a lot of people were posting them. And so because I had such a high frequency at that time, I was getting shown to a lot of people and I was having really high reach and I was having lots of videos go viral and lots of videos reach new potential followers. And so the growth during that period was nuts. It's definitely slowed down since then, but yeah, it was about 400,000 followers in a little under a year, which was wild.
Yeah, I'm curious, how big is your team?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this the other day and like how I can articulate this. There's kind of layers to the onion within my team. So within my immediate team, the team that like works on my Instagram and that I work with at least on a weekly basis regarding my Instagram, I would say it's maybe four-ish, 3 to 4 people. I have a graphic designer who isn't full time, just someone who I kind of use to help me create some of my carousels specifically. So that's one person. Full time, I do have you could call her like a community manager. So she takes the posts that I have created and she creates like a rough schedule for them. And then I just kind of approve or move things around if I want things to be posted on different days. And her biggest job is interacting with my community. I get a lot of direct messages and a lot of comments, and it's really important to me to respond to everyone. But I myself don't have the capacity, nor do I want to spend all day on my phone just answering messages. So she helps me with that. So basically, she has consumed everything I've ever put out. Her and I talk on a daily basis. So she's like my second brain, and she can answer questions. She can help give people links. She can help with like customer service stuff on Instagram. And those are really the two primary people. And then I have a video editor who's, I guess, definitely the third primary person. She edits my reels, but I would say she only edits about 8 reels per month. Whereas if I'm posting 30 to 40 reels per month, you can do the math on like how that breaks down. But she edits 8 reels for me every month. And then outside of that, my wife is our CFO. So she handles like all the type A stuff, the numbers, the taxes. She deals with all the business stuff. And then I also have a personal assistant who helps me with like email and scheduling and kind of just making sure that my life stays afloat and stays running. So that's like my immediate team. And then in our bigger team, because our bigger business is what's called the Insta Club Hub. And that's a membership with about 6,000 people in it. And so definitely can't run that by myself. Definitely can't run that with just the 5 people I've listed so far. So within the Insta Club Hub, it expands to maybe 15 or so people, like a marketing manager. We have someone who's a community manager. We have customer service teams. We have coaches inside that membership who are helping our students. We have graphic designers, copywriters, advertising specialists, that sort of stuff. So when you start to actually like talk about the whole business, we start getting up to 15, 20 people. But just for me, when we're talking immediately about Instagram, social media, we're maybe at like 4 or 5 people.
That's actually a really big team. But it's a big business too. And I'd love to learn a little bit more if you can kind of walk us through what your sales funnel looks like from content to getting someone into Insta Club Hub. What does that process
Mhm.
look like?
Yeah. So the Insta Club Hub is a relatively low ticket offer. We have a 2 week trial for $7. So it's not something that people need to like get on a sales call for. It's not something that takes like a huge pitch. It's not something that often requires like, a live webinar in order to promote. On social, I'm primarily driving people to our email list. So I'd say I probably do 4 posts per week that are in some way promoting the Insta Club Hub. And 3 of those 4 are usually driving to our email list through a freebie or a lead magnet. So I'm saying, hey, if you want 25 viral hooks, comment the word viral and I'll send it to you. And then when they give us their email, of course, we send them the viral hooks. And so we really focus on driving to that email list because we understand that a $7 product is something that can be very easily sold via email. And then occasionally I will sell directly into the trial or directly into the membership on Instagram or on social. But just not a ton because that content is an advertisement really, and it's not going to perform as well as a free lead magnet or a free download would. So that's kind of how our sales funnel looks on like the top end in terms of social. On the back end, we do run ads. I will say probably 75% of our leads, maybe even more, depending on the week, come from organic. So we run ads because we are at the stage of business where it would be silly to not run ads. That'd just be money left on the table. I have sometimes people saying, "Well, why do you run ads if you teach organic social?" Well, because ads it'd be silly. Like I said, it'd be silly to not run ads. I'd be leaving money on the table. So, anyways, we do run ads to just kind of clean up any people who are maybe abandoned cart or they expressed interest and they're on our email list, but they haven't signed up yet. They haven't become a member. And then we are quite heavy in our email marketing flows. So we have a number of different sequences, and it's gotten to the point now where I couldn't even tell you how many different sequences and how many different flows we have. We have an email marketer on our team who helps us with that. We have a copywriter who helps us, refine all of the messaging. We have multiple sales pages. And so the funnel really primarily is taking place via email.
A lot of creators talk about how important email is Would
Mhm.
you say that creating those lead magnets is the best thing that you can do to really drive email subscribers?
1,000%, because I think the modern consumer understands, hey, if I'm giving you my email to get something for quote unquote free, I'm signing up for the email list. They understand that. So you're not like tricking anyone or anything, nor was that ever the point. But nonetheless, it's really tough to get people to buy things right on social unless you're willing to devote the time, energy, and effort to like having one-on-one conversations in the direct messages, or really nurturing and building up the whole sequence via social. It's hard to get people to just straight up click and buy right off social media. So it's much easier to say, hey, I have created this free thing to help solve this problem. It's a quick win. It's a way to deliver value, just like your feed posts, right? So many entrepreneurs and content creators are creating feed posts that offer quick value. Maybe it's a quick laugh, a quick tip, a quick solution, a quick problem solve, whatever. And so that's really what a freebie, a lead magnet, they have a million different names. That's what they're doing, right? Is they're just solving another problem for quote unquote free for just the cost of an email. And I truly believe that the success of a business owner on social media has a lot less to do with how many followers they have and a lot more to do with how many email list subscribers they have. And so that's why my focus and our focus within the business is getting people onto the email list.
What is your typical advice, for students in Insta Club Hub too, who run more like direct to consumer businesses or product based businesses for getting those email subscribers?
Yeah. So again, it's a little bit tougher, but even for a physical product business or a direct to consumer business, there are ways that you can offer digital products that still somehow relate to the physical goods. It's not always possible, but like if I'm thinking if you sell like some special duster, I don't know, just for example, some special duster that, traps dust and it eliminates odor, I don't know. You could maybe offer a download that is like healthy cleaning swaps or toxin free cleaning supplies, or a 7-step checklist to a easy Sunday chore routine. I don't know, just something quick and easy for people to download. But the thing that I see most commonly for like physical product businesses to get people onto their email list is usually some sort of discount. So you sign up for our email list, you get 10, 15, 20% off, or maybe you get entered into some random prize drawing. That's the biggest thing that I see working for physical product businesses.
Yeah. So, what are some of the biggest key components that you're teaching creators and business owners when it comes to getting started on Instagram or like even building out a more developed social strategy?
Yeah, totally. So I think really growing on Instagram, there's so much noise, right? There's so many experts who are talking about you got to do this, you should do that, you should do this. And I will say everything I teach is a general recommendation. It's a general best fit, best practice. It's not going to work for everything or everyone. Nothing is a guarantee, right? It's social media. At the end of the day, anything can happen, and pretty much any strategy can be successful. But from what we've found and what we see is step one to growing on Instagram, really step one to growing on any social media, is identify your niche. We define niche at the Insta Club Hub as the who and the what. Who are you posting for? Like that ideal audience, the ideal listeners, the ideal viewers, the ideal customers, and then what? What are you talking to them about? What is the subcategory, the topic, the industry that you're specifically focused on? So step one, the niche, that is the foundation. That's something that we see so many people tell us, I'm good, I got my niche. And in fact, we did a study one time with incoming members into the club, and of the people who checked the box, like, yes, I know my niche, I'm good to go, 97% upon further review didn't quite have their niche fully defined, or they weren't fully niched down. They were saying things like, oh, well, my niche is fashion. And I was like, that's an entire industry. What fashion? For what demographic? For what group of people? What kind of fashion? Like that's an industry. Let's get more specific. So step one is niche. Step number two is just optimizing your profile. And again, this is something that could apply to any social media. And it sounds very simple, but there are a few key things, whether you're looking at an Instagram bio or like a YouTube page or whatever, that can make a big difference in terms of how many people actually end up following or subscribing. And so that's step two. And then step three is where it comes to actually posting. And that's where we can kind of get lost in the sauce of all the different strategies and techniques to posting and what's working right now. What's a overarching social media strategy in terms of posting that's actually going to generate results in the long term. But if I can give one tip, the one thing that I would say is focusing on share worthy content, because even though algorithms change, even though platforms change, even though, for a while people would say saves on Instagram are a super like, or the best form of engagement is a 3 word comment, whatever. Ultimately, shares have always been the best way to reach new people. And it makes
Yeah.
sense when you think about it from just like a human being perspective. Like when my wife sends me a TikTok, I'm going to watch said TikTok. So that's automatically one extra viewer, one extra potential follower, customer, whatever, for said TikTok. And the same is true when people share things to their stories. Now that post is getting seen by probably hundreds of more people. Or when they send it in their group chat. This morning, I'm in a group chat with like 3 of my buddies or 10 of my buddies from college. This morning, 3 different posts were sent, a TikTok and 2 reels. And so now all of those posts are getting 10 extra views. And so creating that share worthy content is something that kind of defeats the algorithm, so to speak, and allows you to reach more people regardless of the changes.
How can you create more share-worthy content?
Yeah, that's the important question, right? It'd be silly if I was just like create share worthy content. Okay, see you guys. So share worthy content, it really falls into, I for the longest time had been saying 4 different categories, but I really feel like it's 5 different categories now as I've been thinking about it. And so the 5 categories of share worthy content, first and foremost, inspirational content, content that moves people, is really inspiring, motivating. I posted on Threads the other day about just how much admiration I have for working parents, especially like working single moms who are like building, a business on the side or a side hustle. And it was kind of like this inspirational message, kind message. And that got a ton of, I guess we're calling them like rethreads or reshares on Threads. I don't know what we're calling them on Threads, but shares essentially. So inspirational content's number one. Number two is what I call a call to arms. And a call to arms is kind of a, hey, we're all in this together. We all need to help each other out. I think one of the most famous examples is like the ALS ice bucket challenge from 2013, where everyone's, dumping a bucket of ice on their head and we're all raising money for ALS. That's a call to arms. It's, hey, we're all in this together. Tag someone to help spread the news, to help, get more people involved, raise awareness. I guess you could say for this. That's number two. Number three, relatable content. I think that's the stuff that I see shared the most. It's the kind of post where it's like, oh my gosh, this is so me. Or you send it to your partner and you're like, this is so you. Or you send it in your group chat and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so us. That kind of relatable content. It's oftentimes very funny content, like humorous memes type of stuff. That's highly, highly share worthy. Number four is controversial content. And this is the one where I always like to pause and make sure that this isn't being taken out of context, but controversial content. I don't believe that anyone should post controversial content for the sake of controversy, nor should they post quote unquote controversial content to offend people or make people mad or get canceled or whatever. But here's where I kind of make that distinction. In every niche, there are quote unquote unpopular opinions. And for every person, they have certain beliefs that just other people maybe disagree with. And so finding ways to post about those things, as long as it's related to your niche, like I said, and as long as it's still valuable to your audience in some way, it can be highly share worthy. Because from the viewer's perspective, they agree. And so they want to share it to say that they agree. And it's a way that they can kind of voice their opinion without having to directly say it themselves, type of thing. Like they don't have to be the one to make the statement or make the claim. They're just like, hey, I'm amplifying this claim, I'm showing my support for it without directly saying it. Like I was on a walk with my wife last night, and I was like, hey, this might be controversial. And if I was in like the food niche, if I was like a food creator, a recipe blogger, or whatever, I might post about this. But I was like, hey, if I never have wings for the rest of my life, I think I'd be fine with that. Like, I don't hate wings, I don't loathe wings, but if I was just served a breast of chicken instead of wings that I have to eat off the bone, I'm like, hey, I'd be fine with that. I'm not a fan of wings. That would be maybe an unpopular opinion if I was to post about that, because maybe there's a lot of people who really love wings, but there's also a group of people who are like, yeah, I agree. Like wings aren't that great. I'd much rather just have a breast of chicken that I don't have to get all messy. And so those people would share the post. So that's number four. And then last but not least, number five is trending topics, pop culture. Like I think of the halftime show of the Super Bowl. That's like the ultimate pop culture moment where suddenly like there's 50 Rihanna memes and there's 50 Taylor Swift memes and then there's 50 memes about this and that. And these kind of trending topics are a great way to take what's popular in the broader sense and what culture and society is paying attention to on the broad scale and then relate it back to your niche. Find a way to relate this headline, this pop culture, this news, relating it back to your own industry is also very highly share worthy.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's such good advice. Let's talk about the hook of a short form video. So we know that the first 5 seconds are the most important. What advice would you, what advice can you give for really crafting a really strong hook?
Yeah. So what you said is absolutely correct. The beginning of the video is where you should put the majority of your time, energy, and effort. Because if you can't get someone to stop scrolling, all of the time, energy, and effort that you're putting into the rest of your video is a waste because no one's seeing it. So when it comes to the hook, I would say first and foremost, negative is better than neutral, which is better than positive. And what I mean by that is, generally speaking, hooks that have a negative leaning or they use a negative word, such as don't or stop or avoid or quit, something like that, those grab more attention than neutral hooks. And a neutral hook is you're not really saying something is good or bad. You're just kind of telling people what you're going to tell them, or you're saying things like, hey, listen up. Like that's a neutral hook. I'm not telling you a positive or a negative. And then the third of the three, also known as like the least engaging or the least attention grabbing, is positive hooks, where I'm saying, here's three things to help you get more views on your Instagram stories, right? That's a positive hook. And so, generally speaking, negative is most attention grabbing. But I also want to add a word of caution to everyone, which is don't overuse the negative hooks because then it becomes white noise and numerous studies have shown that in traditional media, in newspaper, print media, in TV, like news stations, consistently having negative hooks over and over again kind of makes you the negative Nancy, and people are just not paying attention anymore because everything is doomsday. Everything it loses its power, its impact. That's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is most people are making their hooks too smart, too complex, too fancy, using words that the average person, or I should even go a step further, that the average follower of theirs doesn't necessarily understand. And so, from what we've seen, we did an in-depth study of about 1,000 different "quote unquote" viral reels and TikToks. And what we saw is that generally around a fifth grade reading level is like the comprehension of a good hook. So if I'm writing my hook, I'm trying to use simple words. I'm trying to use words like good and bad. I'm trying to use words like views and followers. I'm staying away from words even like engagement rate or things like that that might get a little bit too specific for people. Now, of course, there are posts where you're going to get more specific, posts where you're going to get super lost in the nitty gritty and lost in the weeds. But if your goal is getting more views and having a more effective hook, kind of dumb it down and keep it simple. And then the final thing that I will say is also keep it short. So maybe like the 5 to 8 word range is best. If you go less than 5 words, you're left with, a 3 or 4 word hook. It's hard to create an engaging sentence in 3 to 4 words. But if you start going to, 15, 20 words, it's kind of a run-on sentence. And you've kind of, just in that sentence, there's an opportunity to lose people's interest. And so 5 to 8 word hooks are generally most effective. But again, every audience, like I said a minute ago, every audience is different, every creator is different. So it's also a matter of just figuring out what style of hooks work best for you as the creator and what style of hooks does your audience respond the best to.
Yeah, what is the relationship between the text hook on screen and then what you're
Mhm.
actually saying as well? Like, how do you have that dual hook relationship?
Yeah, so this is such a great question. I think that there's actually multiple different hooks that can be presented, and you kind of just shared one of them, which is like the text on the screen, maybe like above your head, can be slightly different than what you're saying. So if I'm saying like, "Do your story views suck? Here are 3 things to stop doing." Like if that's my text hook that I'm saying, or I shouldn't say my text hook, that's my verbal hook that I'm saying, it might be in the like the closed captions text, but maybe above my head, I'm going to just put low story views question mark, or I'm going to say fix your stories exclamation mark. So just something very short, so that there's a second opportunity to hook. The third opportunity to hook might just be like what's in the actual video. Earlier, I mentioned my crazy chaotic parrot. He's oftentimes in my shoulders in videos. Part of that is just because he's a people bird and he like wants to sit on my shoulder all day. And he also thinks my microphone is a fun toy to try to attack. But also part of that is I know like if I'm talking to you on a video and there's a green parrot on my shoulder, that's visually engaging. It makes you stop the scroll and pay attention. But there's also ways you can do this without going out and buying a parrot. You could just, zoom in at the beginning of your video, or you can use a quick transition or effect at the very beginning of your video, which grabs people's attention. And then the final form of hook is an audio based hook. So not just the tech, not just the words that you're saying, but an actual sound effect. Or I've seen people do like a popping noise, or maybe a little chime, or just a little background audio that quickly fades out. Having those little moments at the beginning of your video can just add an extra layer that can hopefully grab people's attention and hook them in.
Yeah, that's so good. I saw a post you made recently that said that it's really important to do a few things right after you make a post. What are those things that you should be doing?
Yeah, so I think again, this is going to vary depending on people's availability and their time. And so, what I'll say first and foremost is I'll share right now what I think is the best possible strategies to help you maximize your post's performance after posting. But if you're not able or willing or capable of doing any of the things I'm about to mention, it's fine. I would rather have someone post and ghost, like post on Instagram and then put their phone down because their kid's crying or they got to, take their dog to the vet or whatever. Like maybe they just want to go live their life. I'd much rather have you do that than not post at all. I don't want a feeling of like, oh, well, I can't do the 17 steps that Brock mentioned, so I shouldn't post today. No, no, no. Even if you can't do any of the steps, still post because a post is better than no post. But with all of that being said, I think there's a few things that you can do. First and foremost, if you are going to use hashtags, that would be the time to make sure that your hashtags are applied either in your caption or in the comments section. I'm not the biggest fan of hashtags, but if you're using them, that's the time to do it. If your goal is to get the most possible views on this post, I would share the post to your stories immediately, post it up onto your stories, add some context in your Instagram story so that people have a reason to go click on it, not hiding it behind like a sticker that says new post, click here. And it's like trying to clickbait people, but actually adding some context, creating some curiosity so that people want to learn more or they want to go view the post. I oftentimes recently, this is one of my favorite things, I'll add kind of like a note or a PS into the comments. So I will comment on my own post. Sometimes it's just like a disclaimer. Sometimes I'm asking people a question. Sometimes I am adding like a note, like a call to action into the comments. But commenting on my own post is a great way to kind of get the conversation started. Then, once I do those things, I will oftentimes go back to any previous posts that I have made. So, let's say I posted this morning at 9 a.m. Maybe I'll go back to last night's post and I'll make sure that I respond to all the rest of the comments that I missed. I'll make sure that I like any comments that were unrespondable. Like maybe they just said awesome. And I'm not going to like type out a long response. I'm just going to like their comments. It just creates more engagement for my account. And then I'll also go into my direct messages and respond to DMs there and interact with people. All of these things just help create more total engagement for my account. They help my account interact with more people, which hopefully in turn helps more people come back to my post and find it.
Yeah, I love that. When we think about Instagram stories, what is the best way to kind of integrate stories into an overall strategy?
Yeah, such a great question. And stories are unique in that I think there's really three different categories or strategies or goals, I guess you could say, in how you use stories. So category A, goal A is I just want to build personal relationships with my followers. I want my followers to have a deep sense and understanding of who I am as a person and build my relationship with them. Maybe you sell a high ticket product. Maybe you are a one on one coach. You sell something that's very high touch and you need people to intimately trust you before they become customers. Well, if that's the case, then the kind of stories that I would recommend you post are talking head stories, behind the scenes stories, posting a lot of stories throughout the day, every single day. Like I'm talking 5 to 10 stories, documenting your daily life, sharing your opinions, sharing behind the scenes. The thing that you need to be prepared for is that even though you're going to be building this deep relationship, you're not going to be reaching a wide amount of people. When you do stories in the way I just described, usually you're not going to be getting a ton of views. You're going to only have like your quote unquote super fans watching. You're going to have probably your lowest possible views if you're following that strategy. But there is an upside, which we've already talked about. The second goal or strategy B, goal B, if you want to call it that, is I want more views on my feed posts. I don't care about my stories. I don't really care, if my story views are high. I don't really use stories that much, but I want to make sure people see my reels. And there might be numerous reasons why you're doing this. Maybe you have a collaboration post that you want to make sure does well. Maybe you're doing your first ever brand partnership and you want the brand to be really happy because the post got a lot of views. Well, then if that's the case, then I wouldn't recommend just doing a bunch of talking head behind the scenes stories. Instead, I would recommend only doing a few stories and making sure that you are sharing your reel, your feed post, whatever, to your story every single day, making sure that you are creating curiosity, that you are referencing what people have commented, you're putting screenshots of a conversation from the comments, you're just generally trying to create more buzz and attention for said feed post because some people are only ever going to watch stories. So they're going to have no idea that you posted in the feed unless you post about it in your stories. That's strategy B. Strategy C for goal C is I want more story views. Maybe you have an upcoming launch and you know you're going to use your stories to sell. Maybe you just want more story viewers in general because you're going to be promoting something. Maybe you just want more story viewers just because you want more people who are interacting via stories. And so if that's your goal, then what I would recommend is posting only, and this blows people's minds when I say this because it's very opposite of what I had been saying for years as a stories coach. Um, Post very infrequently. Like less is more. Literally 3 to 4 stories per week, taking 1 or even 2 days off between posting stories. And when you are posting on stories, only posting 1 or 2 clips and having those 1 to 2 clips not be talking head, not be video or even photo stories, having them be text post stories with sometimes even like 2 or 3 paragraphs of text on the story. If I was to pull up right now and show you my insights of my most viewed stories over the last 18 months, I looked at the other day. I believe it's like 26 of my top 27 are all in this style. They are all stories that are at most a photo, but probably just like a blank solid color background. And they have at least a couple sentences, if not a couple paragraphs of text. They always start with a hook in that first sentence. And usually the story ends with a call to action to use direct message automation. So I'm telling people, reply to this story with this keyword, reply to this story with this phrase, and I'll send you a discount code, or reply to this story with this emoji, and I'll send you a link to whatever. Those are the stories that get the most views. And if we think about it, I don't want to get us too lost in the sauce here, but if you're using Instagram stories and you're watching stories, right? You're just an average consumer watching Instagram stories and you open someone's story and it is a 60-second video of them talking and rambling on, going on a rant to the camera, even if it's super engaging, it's really tough for you to actually interact with said story. Like at most, they have like one of those little stickers that you can like tap on and vote or something. But if it's a 60-second story, this is one of the challenges on Instagram. You can't fast forward, you can't rewind. So let's say I post a 60-second super engaging rant and you're like, yeah, I'm into this. And you're watching. And then at second 43, you get a little text notification at the top of your phone. So then you like glance at the text, then you come back to what I was saying. But now you missed 4 seconds. And you're like, wait, what did he say? But now you're at the 47-second mark. So you have to decide, am I just going to say, whatever, I missed it, skip the whole story? Or am I going to tap back and watch the entire 43 seconds again just to hear that last sentence? And so it makes the user standpoint, it makes the viewer have all these challenges. Whereas instead, if I was to literally take everything that I just said and just type it out instead of speaking it, put it in like 2 to 3 paragraphs of text, Now someone can read it at their own pace. They can easily hold their finger down and they can skim it, they can read it, they can reread sentences, they can move at their own pace, consume how they like. The same message is being delivered. It's the same exact words. I'm just typing them instead of speaking them. And that way, it's much more engaging. It's much easier to consume. And that is why those stories get more engagement. And of course, then that engagement leads to more views overall.
What is your take on using like a link sticker in stories versus DM automation like ManyChat?
I'm not totally against the link sticker. I'm also not totally against the link in bio. I just don't think it's going to be most effective. I think if you are putting the link sticker on your stories or you're putting the link in your bio and you're telling people, that's the big difference. You can have a link in your bio or you can have a link in your stories. When you're telling people to click it, that's when what we see views go down, engagement goes down. And also for you as the business owner, you don't know who clicked. So you have no idea how to follow up. You have no idea how to answer questions. You can't serve people. If the site went down or the code didn't work or they had a problem at checkout, you can help them if you're using DM automation because you can have a DM conversation with them about it. But if they're just clicking the link in your bio or they're clicking the link on your stories, there's no opportunity for you to do that. So I'm not anti link in bio or anti link in stories, but I do think people need to know that on average, those stories or those posts are going to get less views and less engagement. And so that's why I very much prefer and recommend direct message automation.
Okay, yeah, that's amazing advice. Switching gears just a little bit, I'm really curious, what is your take on threads and using threads to grow on Instagram?
I went through such a hot and cold relationship with Threads, and I could even say I'm like still going through it. Where I got on Threads right when it launched, and when if anyone is listening and they were on Threads day one, they'll remember it was so chaotic and so fun, and like there was this 24, 48 hour period where you were getting thousands and thousands of views and likes on a thread just because like no one was there and everyone was getting on and they were seeing your post. It was crazy. And then for a few months, I just didn't use it. And I didn't feel like I was missing out on much. But also, I think that was partially fueled by those first few days where everyone was like, let's keep Threads a platform where there's no business, there's no tips, there's no social media. Let's make Threads just a public diary where we're all just brain dumping and word vomiting. And there was this like big backlash against anyone who tried to not only sell, but like just post education or tips or advice on threads, even if it was about something not relating to threads. And so I was like, okay, I'm just not going to use this right now because there's not an aptitude. People aren't enjoying education. They're not enjoying business or tips or sales or anything like that on threads. Now, fast forward a year later, everyone's on threads and they're using it for business. People are using it to promote their podcasts and their YouTubes and their sales and their promotions, whatever. And they're using it to educate and to talk about their niche. And so I have fallen back in love with threads and it's really fun. And I definitely do use it as a more, let's say, a less professional, less buttoned up version of my social media where I might post about some random thoughts. The other day, I was like, hey, I haven't gone tubing in like 10 years. So I don't think I've truly experienced joy in the last 10 years because I haven't been sitting on an inflatable raft being pulled behind a boat at 30 miles an hour. So I think I need to do that. And I just posted that on threads. Like that has nothing to do with anything, but it was a random thought I had at 11 p.m. But all of that to say, what I am using threads for from a business perspective is I'm using it as my testing ground for my posts. So if I have an idea for a post, I will post it on threads first. Maybe I'll just post like the rough outline, or I'll post like a text version, or sometimes I'll just take my script that I was going to use for a reel and I'll just post it on threads and I'll see how it does. And I'll not only see like, oh, hey, this one got a lot of likes. So I'm actually going to pursue that idea and I'm going to create that reel. But also, hey, I posted something this way and a lot of people were confused about one sentence or a lot of people misunderstood this one thing. So then I'll change it and then I'll record the post. So I've been using threads strategically to come up with content and just refine my content and make sure that my posts are as effective or as engaging as possible before I even create them. And it's been really fun and rewarding. And it's also just really fun on threads to get to kind of connect with the community. I've been doing some things I wouldn't normally do. Like if people are tagging me. And if they're listening to this and they're going to tag me, the ship has sailed at this point. But at least at the time I'm saying this, people have been like tagging me the last few days, and they're like, "Hey, Brock, can you look at my account and give me some feedback?" And on Instagram, I get dozens of DMs every day, comments every day asking for that. And I don't do that because that's something that we do as like a paid offer for our Insta Club Hub students.
Yeah,
But for people who are messaging me on threads, I'm kind of doing it as like a fun community interaction moment where I'm like, hey, you're one of the three people who commented on my thread today and asked for a review. So sure, I'll give you some quick feedback. It's just been really fun and rewarding. And it's also a very funny platform. I've been enjoying it. I've been enjoying it a heck of a lot more than I used to enjoy Twitter or X. So yeah, I think it's surprisingly has staying power, and it'll be interesting over the next year because there aren't currently ads on Threads. There are people who are advertising and people who are like promoting their stuff, but there aren't like paid ads or sponsored threads. There's very small amounts of photos or videos. It's really just text content. And so it'll be interesting to see how the app progresses over the next year or so. But I'm really enjoying it right now.
it's been interesting to watch it evolve for sure, from like the day it launched to how it's changed
Yeah.
and grown for sure. My next question is definitely deeply personal to me as a brand new podcaster myself, but also with just the rise of podcasting in general. You made a
Mhm.
post recently about how you have yourself two podcasts, right? You have Build
Mhm.
Your Tribe with Shalene on YouTube, which is a video podcast, and then you also have Social Media Moneymakers, which is an audio only podcast. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
We do technically have like a video component for social media money makers, but it's not a priority. We're like 7 episodes behind on the video component.
Yeah. But you mentioned how, it's difficult. Like you have this massive following on Instagram, but a lot of your followers don't know you have these podcasts. And you said that people do not listen to podcasts, from social. So I'm curious what your strategy is too for like driving those subscribers and listeners to your podcast using Instagram.
Yeah, it's tough. It is tough. Um, the thing is there's like two sides to this coin because on one hand, if you're not posting about your podcast, no one's gonna know. Your followers are not gonna know. You're missing out on probably 90% of your listener base if you're not posting about your podcast. However, at the same time, the fact of the matter is most people who are consuming content on whatever social media platform, it's a very different mindset than when they're consuming a podcast. And so the likelihood of someone being like, oh, yeah, I've been watching a bunch of 7-second reels. Now let me go listen to this 45-minute podcast. It's just a completely different headspace. And so most people are not going to jump over from your social media, from your post, whatever, into your podcast. But nonetheless, I think it's important to still post about your podcast so that people know about it. And so that when they are in that headspace, they're like, oh, yeah, I got a long drive, or hey, I'm going to work out, or I'm doing chores around the house and I want to listen to a podcast. They're like, oh, yeah, Brock's got a show. Brock's got a podcast that I can listen to. And I think the biggest thing with podcasting is it's slow to grow. It is so tough to grow a podcast. The biggest things that I have found besides just social media and hoping that maybe a post goes viral is the guests that you're having on your show that can make a big difference. On my podcast, it's interesting. The guests, at least on social media moneymakers, where I'm like interviewing people, it's not necessarily how many followers the guest has, it's the quality of followers that the guest has. And if the guest has like raving super fans and the guest is like, hey, I'm on this podcast and they're posting about it multiple times themselves, that episode's going to do a lot better and people are going to want to go listen to it. So guests are definitely a great way to grow the podcast. And then it's really just consistency. It's crazy to look at the stats. It's like I think 97% of podcasts don't make it past episode 5 or something like that. And like
Yeah.
99% of podcasts don't make it past episode 10. Don't quote me on those numbers, but it's something like that where it's like basically no one sticks with it when it comes to podcasting. And so you really put yourself in a different league by just staying consistent with the episodes.
Yeah. Well, I think you're episode 6 for us. So that's good. We're on our way to
Awesome.
that consistency. It's
Yeah, you're in,
exciting, but yeah.
you're a top 5 percenter already.
I am a really big fan of both your podcasts, but also the Build Your Tribe. I'm a huge super fan of your mom, so I tell her I said hi. I hope she comes on the show one day too. That would be rad.
Will
Um,
do.
yeah, I'm curious how you think Instagram is going to evolve, like even within the next 6 to 12 months.
I think that's a really big question. I think that there is a kind of rejection right now of the super highly polished, highly edited content. And a lot of people have been feeling that way for a while about like photo content and content that's like, photoshopped and like super filtered and all this stuff. But I think now that that rejection is even spreading into like the Hormozy style talking head videos, where when entrepreneurs and content creators first started posting these talking head videos, they were unique, right? This was the time 2 years ago or even a year and a half ago when reels were all just like short sound bites and trending audios and lip syncs. And here comes content creators who are talking. They're using their own voice. They're having these like dynamic captions, and that's cool. It's original. It's unique. And then now a lot of people are doing that. I don't want to say everyone, but a lot of people, maybe even the majority of people, are posting these talking head style videos, and everyone's using the same apps to edit them. And so they all kind of look the same. And so those things that used to make you unique are now making you a part of the crowd, a part of what everyone is doing. And so I think that there's this rejection of that style of content and this re-embracing of in the moment, raw, authentic, not polished content. A lot of the content I've been posting recently has just been filmed on my phone, filmed with that same $10 Amazon microphone that I bought 7 years ago for my first course. And not filming things with my professional camera or my professional microphone or professional lighting. And it's been really cool to see that that content, which is arguably easier to create, is also connecting with people more. And so I think that's really exciting to see on Instagram. And I also think, um, views have come up. They have. In 2023, they were down a lot, but in 2024, they are pretty much the same or even up a little bit from where they were in 2023. And so I think it'll be really interesting over the next year to see how that trend progresses. And just see, our views actually coming back up, what is causing this. And then the final thing I'll say is it'll be super crazy to see what happens on social media during a US election, because that is just always a time where people are spending so much money on ads. And I don't want to say people, I want to say corporations and government agencies and politicians are spending so much money on ads. And so it'll be interesting to see just how the organic social media responds as a reflection of that.
Yeah, for sure. As we've kind of reached the end, I'm curious as a final takeaway to like in your perspective as an Instagram coach and from so many years doing this, what are your kind of top pieces of advice to creators and business owners when it comes to growing on Instagram?
Yeah, well, I first and foremost, I want to say thank you so much for having me today. This has been so awesome, and your questions are so
Yeah.
wonderful. So I'm really honored to be here. In terms of like the biggest piece of advice that I can give to people, if there's anything that they take away from today's episode, anything that they take away from listening to me or even following me if they choose to do so, is to just get started. There's a lot of strategies, there's a lot of advice, there's a lot of things that are changing, there's a lot of things that are ever present. But the biggest thing is to just get started. And very much like my duct tape trampoline snowboard video when I was 10 years old, I would not be here today if I hadn't started in that sloppy, messy, raw, real, imperfect way. And fortunately, like I said in the answer to my previous question, people are embracing that. The average viewer is appreciating and embracing this raw, real, imperfect content. And so just start posting, start sharing content, start putting stuff out there. Your first post will not be very good. Your 10th post will not be very good. Your 100th post will not be very good. But eventually, when your post number 300 goes live and it does really well, and people are like, wow, you're an overnight success. You went viral. How'd you do that? That's so awesome. And you're like, well, I posted 299 times before this. You just didn't see it.
Right.
Right. And that's the practice. And I think that we all understand that in most areas of life, things take a lot of time and practice. Right. Like we're like, hey, if you wanted to be an Olympian, you wanted to be in the Paris Games this summer, how do you get there? And if I was like practice, everyone would be like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. I got to practice for, 10,000 hours every single year. I got to dedicate my life to this craft. But on social media, suddenly we forget that you still have to practice. You still have to show up. You still have to
Yeah.
put in the work. I think the one benefit though is that you're not going to have to dedicate 40 years to become a professional content creator. You can dedicate a couple months and suddenly you'll be just as skilled or even more skilled than 99% of people. So just show up, just start posting, start being imperfect and raw and real, and you'll improve over time and eventually you'll get to where you want to go.
I love that. Thank you so much, Brock. Thank you for being so generous with all of this information. It's truly a masterclass on Instagram. And I'm really, really excited that you were able to come on today. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Winter. Thank you for having me.